Ethan had always thought interstellar travel would be mundane, the sort of thing advertised in hollow brochures with smiling humans sipping nutrient shakes while stars streaked past panoramic windows. He had not anticipated the cosmic calamity a single careless joke could unleash. "I'm single," he muttered to the bored clerk at the docking station, half to himself and half to amuse a holographic cat that had somehow wandered into the line. The words hung in the air like a spark over dry fuel. Within moments, the ordinary hum of the station warped into a symphony of startled whispers, mechanical shutters clicking, and a subtle vibration in the floor that suggested something, or someone, was coming. When they appeared, it was like the universe had decided to make Ethan the center of an art installation, only with a threat of immediate abduction. Two women, identical in every startling way except the long, delicate ears that rose from the crowns of their heads like twin crescents of polished metal, approached with the precision of predators who had rehearsed the choreography of claiming a human soul. Their eyes, luminous and unsettlingly deep, followed his every movement, yet he caught the corner of their gaze that hinted at mischief rather than menace. Ethan's first thought, absurd as it seemed, was, if aliens could smirk, these two would be doing it right now. "I'm afraid someone said I'm single?" he offered, voice wavering like a badly tuned comlink. Their voices rang in perfect unison, melodious yet tinged with amusement. "Indeed," they said, and the word carried an authority that made Ethan consider the possibility of voluntary orbit around a nearby star just to escape them. Before he could process the sentence, they had each grasped an arm and begun walking him through the bustling station. He stumbled over his own feet, and somehow a stray hovercart nearly flattened him while the sisters weaved with uncanny grace around everything, as if gravity itself obeyed their silent commands. Ethan's protests, muffled by their synchronized pace and occasional interjections about human awkwardness, only seemed to encourage them. "We must introduce you to our protocols," one said, tone both deadly serious and faintly sarcastic, while the other muttered, "He's already failing the very first lesson." Ethan's attempt at self-defense, a half-hearted suggestion that maybe he could just leave, was met with a quiet, conspiratorial look between them that made it clear his options were limited, unless he was ready to star-hop naked through the void. By the time they arrived at the airlock, Ethan realized he had crossed the threshold from mundane life into something wholly unpredictable. Holographic maps flickered along the walls, showing star systems he could barely pronounce, and a gentle hum of engines suggested the ship was already in motion. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he acknowledged the absurdity. He was being claimed because of a joke, and yet, somehow, the universe was entirely serious. As one of the sisters adjusted a wrist-mounted device that seemed capable of generating a miniature wormhole on a whim, Ethan sighed and muttered, "Well, at least they didn't make me dance first." The corner of their lips curved, almost imperceptibly, and Ethan had the sinking feeling that his adventure, chaotic and hilarious as it promised to be, had only just begun. Ethan's first night aboard the sister's ship was a surreal blur of shifting gravity and soft, omnipresent lights that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Corridors bent at angles that made him question the very nature of spatial geometry, and doors whispered open as though curious about his clumsy approach. He had spent the first hour trying and failing to get his footing while the twins glided effortlessly past, their long ears twitching with what he could only assume was amusement. He quickly realized that surviving this environment required both dexterity and diplomacy, the latter being something he had historically avoided unless negotiating with stubborn vending machines. Breakfast was a ritual in its own right. Floating trays of shimmering nutrient spheres hovered toward him, each delicately wrapped in translucent membranes that pulsed with light. He reached for one, only to have it dart away like a living creature. "Don't grab it like that," one sister scolded, although her tone carried a faint edge of laughter. "It must sense your intentions." Ethan blinked at the tiny sphere, which now seemed to mimic his movements, and muttered, "I swear I'm not stalking you." The other sister rolled her eyes, but, secretly, Ethan thought he detected the corner of a smile. The sisters' lessons in alien etiquette were a combination of rigorous instruction and gentle mockery. "Telepathic greetings," which involved projecting a mental echo of one's thoughts, left Ethan frazzled. Every time he tried, he accidentally broadcast his daydream about Earth pizza and a failed attempt at a karaoke contest, eliciting a synchronized gasp from the twins. "You humans have no subtlety," one said, though Ethan noticed her eyes twinkling with amusement. The other added, "Subtlety is optional if chaos is entertaining." That particular gem became his unofficial motto aboard the ship. Midday brought unexpected excitement when a security alert flashed across the ship's console. A cluster of mischievous nanobeasts, practically invisible to the naked eye, had infiltrated the galley. As the sisters deployed microgravity nets, Ethan, in a panic, attempted to help but instead ended up entangled in a floating web of nanites, spinning slowly like a bewildered satellite. "I think I just invented a new form of zero-gravity slapstick," he groaned, eliciting laughter that resonated through the corridors in a way that made him feel oddly at home. As the day waned, Ethan began to sense the subtle bonds forming between them. The sisters' relentless precision softened when they noticed his persistence, their teasing punctuated by genuine care. When they finally allowed him a moment of respite, floating in the observation deck as the stars slid past like molten diamonds, Ethan realized that this chaotic, humorous, alien-driven existence had begun to feel less like captivity and more like an invitation to something utterly unprecedented. Somewhere between zero-gravity mishaps, telepathic faux pas, and accidental encounters with tiny rogue creatures, a fragile trust had been established, one that promised adventure, laughter, and a partnership that neither species could have anticipated, bound together by the absurdity of a single careless joke. Ethan never imagined that a single remark about being single could thrust him into the middle of interstellar chaos. But by the third cycle aboard the sister's ship, chaos had become something like a routine, albeit one with spectacularly unpredictable consequences. A rogue faction of starfarers, rogue even by galactic standards, had intercepted a transmission indicating that Ethan might hold a key to a hidden archive of cosmic knowledge. The sisters, ever alert, had already prepared their defenses, though their approach included a curious blend of precision strategy and subtle, gleeful sarcasm that left Ethan alternately terrified and amused. "If they try anything, I'm counting on you two to look menacing," he said, voice wavering, as he fumbled with a holographic map that seemed to mock his sense of direction. The ensuing chase was chaotic, but far from devoid of humor. Anti-gravity traps sent the starfarers tumbling in loops that defied physics, while Ethan, clinging desperately to a pair of floating handlebars, managed to accidentally trigger a holographic projection of himself performing an elaborate dance routine. The distraction worked in their favor, and he couldn't resist muttering, "I've always known my terrible dancing would save lives someday." The sisters' eyes flickered with approval, their ears twitching in a way that made Ethan think he might be starting to understand their language of subtle emotion. As they navigated a particularly perilous nebula, where the colors bent like molten glass and gravity waves threatened to fold the ship into itself, Ethan realized just how much he had changed. He no longer panicked at the unknown. He had learned to rely on quick thinking, improvisation, and the unpredictable generosity of the sisters' guidance. They had taught him that humor could diffuse tension, that trust could form in the most absurd circumstances, and that even in a universe of infinite peril, bonds mattered more than any self-preserving caution. The final confrontation came as they reached the edge of a collapsing star cluster. The rogue starfarers attempted one last assault, but Ethan, armed with knowledge of the ship's unpredictable physics and the twins' tactical brilliance, led a counter that left the attackers spinning harmlessly in the magnetic fields of the dying stars. One sister quipped, "I told you humans were surprisingly resourceful when panicked," and Ethan, clinging to the ship rail, grinned despite the exhaustion. "Surprisingly resourceful or just spectacularly lucky," he replied. When the dust settled, the sisters finally relaxed their unyielding hold on him, not because they intended to release him entirely, but because the pursuit had forged a new dynamic. Ethan was no longer merely a target. He was a trusted partner, capable of contributing in ways neither species had predicted. Floating together in the observation deck, Watching the stars shift in gentle streams of color, he felt a rare and profound connection. A bond of shared experience, laughter, and trust that transcended species and expectation. He thought of Earth, of the joke that had started it all, and laughed quietly to himself. Somehow, in the absurd, unpredictable expanse of the galaxy, being single had led him to a place he had never imagined, surrounded by two alien women who had taught him that life and adventure were always better when taken with a touch of humor and a willingness to leap into the unknown.